So hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Oh, I have to unmute myself here.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're on, Harvey. We can hear you.
Happy Sunday, everybody. It's 11:30 here in Atlanta and a beautiful day, about 80 degrees. So today we're going to do a demonstration on how to turn a platter, or at least how I turn a platter, which may not be the same as how everybody else does it, but I think we're pretty close. If you came here expecting to see the basket illusion platter, I hate to disappoint you, but that's not what I'm going to be demonstrating today. We're just going to do round and brown today. The reason I like to turn platters is because if you have an outstanding piece of wood, something with really beautiful grain on it, or a burl or something like that, that you really want to highlight and showcase the beauty of the wood, platter is the best way to do that. Because platter is a fairly large piece, gives you sort of a large canvas, so to speak, to show off the characteristics of the wood. With that said, the piece of wood that I've chosen for today is a pretty crappy piece of wood. It's a piece of mahogany. It has absolutely no characteristics to it all. It's not the good mahogany, it's the African mahogany. So it's a fairly lightweight piece of wood. It's about 11 inches in diameter, close to 2 inches thick. Good platter size to use for a demonstration. So that's kind of what we're going to do. But before we get started, I'm going to show you a brief set of pictures just to show you some of the platters that I've done over the past, just to give you an idea of some of the ways you can turn a platter to feature its best characteristics. So let me turn off this thing here. So this is an example of an ambrosia maple platter. This is a very large piece. It's about, I want to say 15, maybe even 16 inches in diameter. And it's got all kinds of nice stuff going on in the wood. So when I did this one, I chose to sort of do a beaded detail on the rim to frame in that section where I did some texturing with the Sorby texture tool. And let me move to the next one here. I got to get my mouse down here. Here we go. And this is a Babinga platter, also a pretty large one. This is maybe 14, 15 inches. This one I chose to put a little bead detail on both ends of the rim, but I didn't do anything in the rim just because this piece of wood just sort of speaks for itself. It's got beautiful chatoyance, so when you move it around in the light, you could see the reflections of the light in different ways. Very typical for Babinga. This is beautiful piece of curly maple. The lighting that I used when I took the picture doesn't really show the curl that much, but it was an outstanding piece of wood. In this case, I just put a single bead detail to separate the rim from the bowl part. And here's a maple burl. It's about 12 inches diameter. Had a huge void in it, and just piece of wood that you really don't want to do anything to other than let the wood speak for itself with all those rays and all the various colors and everything in that wood. So just a single tiny little bead separating the rim from the bowl part. This is another maple burl. Just got a little bark inclusion in the middle. You may not be able to see it, but around the rim of the piece is a series of beads, all about 1/16 of an inch. Of course, I've done those with the D-Way beading tool. So that just brings some attention to the rim, but then your eyes get pulled into the center of the piece with all that change of color in there. That's also about 12 inches in diameter. This is a walnut crotch. Not a very big piece. It's maybe 10 inches in diameter or so. Single bead detail again. And then just the crotch just about smack in the middle of the piece. And then I also do square platters. I like to turn them. This piece of zebra wood, I'd say it's about 12 inches across and probably about 15, 16 inches on the diagonal. And this is another one. This is just absolutely gorgeous fiddleback maple, also about 12 inches across. Gorgeous piece of wood. Just let the wood speak for itself in this case. I think that's all the ones that I had to show you. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to get started here. So as I said before, I'm going to be working with this piece of 11-inch diameter, cheap mahogany. Oh yeah, I forgot to, excuse me, I forgot to start recording. I don't know why, I always seem to forget to do that. So let me turn that on now, record on this computer. Okay, so now I'm recording too. And even though I put a little note here to remind myself to record, I still forgot. But anyway, at least I remembered before I got started. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the piece of wood here, and I have already marked off here where I'm going to cut a recess. So this is a recess that will fit the jaws of this chuck here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it basically between centers, except my chuck is going to be one of the centers that's going to sit against the back of the piece here. And I'm going to put a piece of mouse pad. Where am I? Here I am. Piece of mouse pad behind that, just so that it sits against the chuck jaws, and it makes it feel safer that way, although it's perfectly safe without it. Just make sure everything's nice and tight. Okay, so I'm going to cut this recess. This is going to be the front of the piece here. So by cutting a recess in there, that allows me to be able to grip the piece to hold it while I turn the back of it. And then the back of the piece will have a tenon on it, very short tenon, that I will use to hold it when I turn the front of the piece. So just to get started here, safety first. Whenever I demonstrate, I always wear a face shield. Whenever I turn, I always wear a face shield. When I demonstrate, a lot of times I don't wear the face shield because of audio issues, and today is going to be one of those occasions. So I'm not going to wear the face shield, but in lieu of the face shield, I am going to put these safety goggles over the safety glasses that I'm already wearing. Just blowing the dust off them. And then, if necessary, I will mask up. I do have a mask waiting for me here. And I will likely put that on in a little while when I get ready to start making real dust. Okay, so to cut this recess, I'm going to come in here, straight in here with a parting tool. And because the tailstock is sort of in the way, I have to raise the parting tool up a little higher than I normally would so that I clear the tailstock, which means I had to raise my tool rest up a little bit higher so that I can still be cutting on center. So when I start the lathe, I always start with the speed off. And I turn the speed up slowly. And then I'm just going to come in with the parting tool and just cut that recess. And it's about, I'd say, 3/16 deep. And now I could get rid of the tailstock and just clean out the curve. Lost my chuck key for a second. And then I can expand into the recess. That looks okie doke. Now, the first thing I always like to do before I start doing anything is I like to mark the center of, this is going to be the back of the piece. I always like to mark the center so that when I have to turn this thing, reverse it later to take off the tenon, I have an easy way of finding the center mark. If you don't do that, you're always hunting for it. And this just saves time. Okay, so I'll leave the tailstock engaged for the moment. And because this was cut on the bandsaw, it's not really round. So the first thing I'll do is just round it off with my bowl gouge. Okay, that feels good. Still got a couple of bandsaw marks on there, so we'll take one more cut. Okay, and that looks good. So I'm going to leave the tailstock in place as long as I possibly can. When it gets to be in the way, then I'll remove it. But for now, it's okay to leave it there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I already marked off where the tenon is going to be. And for this particular chuck that I'm using, the tenon will be about 3 1/4 inches. And I'm going to expose that tenon first, and then I'll shape what will be the back of the platter. So this is just wasting some wood away now. Okay, that'll be my tenon right there. And then I'm going to leave a little shoulder, and the rest of this becomes the back of the piece. Now I'll give my tenon its final shape. I like to use just a 3/8 inch detail gouge for that, just to make sure that I got a good sharp corner right in here, and that this surface here, this little shoulder that I left, has to be flat. And now I can shape the back of the piece. So again, I'll leave the tailstock in place as long as I possibly can, but it will eventually get in my way, and then I'll get rid of it. So this is just shaping the back of the piece now. And I also have to decide what kind of platter I want. Do I want the platter to have sort of a rim, or I just want it to be just a continuous platter? So I think I'll put a little rim on this one. So that means I really need to just waste away a lot of this wood here. So that'll be about the size of the rim. Remember now, this is the back of the piece. So that means this part here will be the bowl part of the platter. So it's sort of like a plate. So this part needs to get rounded over. Okay, that looks reasonably decent. This mahogany's turning fairly well, considering that it's not one of my favorite woods to turn. Just cleaning up the surface a bit here. Taking a very light shear on it. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to turn it around. And then I could do the other side. I could have made my tenon about 1/4 of an inch smaller. It would have been a perfect circle for the chuck jaws, but that's okay. Okay, so now the front of the piece. So what I like to do is take a pencil and just sighting down the piece, mark off where that rim ended on the back and just bring it to the front. So I know how big to make the rim part on the front. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the line. I think you can. Okay, so now I will bring the rim part to its final thickness. I always like to work in stages so that when I'm working on the platter, the outer part here tends to be, when it gets thin, it tends to start to flutter. And when it flutters, you can't really get a good control on it. You can't get a good surface on it because the tool starts to bounce back and forth on the wood. So what I like to do is leave all the mass in the middle and just get the rim part turned down to its final thickness and get that part to anything I'm going to do to it. I got to do that now. And then once the rim is done, I don't touch it again, and I'll get rid of all of this wood in the middle. So the first thing I see is I have some tear out right on the top of the piece, right over here. Okay, so I'm going to try to take a better cut on that before I go to work on the other side. So I'm going to lay my gouge down in more of a shearing position where the handle's low. So I'm cutting the wood at about a 45-degree angle. And now I can see that I don't see any more tear out in it, or at least nothing that can't be sanded away. Just a tiny little bit right here, right there. But other than that, it's pretty good. Maybe even one more pass in the opposite direction might make it feel better. And that is as clean as I can get it. I don't see any tear out at all in it now, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the rim area, just bringing it down to its final thickness. Sorry, I didn't realize I had both pictures on the same camera. Okay, so we're getting down there. We're still about 3/8 of an inch thick. I also have to make the decision if I want to put a bead someplace, to define the rim area, put a bead either right out here at the very outer circumference, and maybe put another one in there where the bowl part blends in with it, or do I just want to do no beads? So I usually like to define the area with a bead. Now, this mahogany wood doesn't take the beads very well from the D-Way beading tools, but we'll see what we can do with it anyway. So first I've got to get the surface quality in this area here as good as I can possibly get it. And that looks pretty good to me. So I think we'll take a beading tool out. And I'm going to use a 3/16 inch beading tool. And this is the beading tool here. I have myself a dedicated tool camera here. It's just for showing you the tools. So this is the D-Way beading tool. You notice it's fluted all the way down the middle, highly polished. It's M42 steel, which has got cobalt in it. Exceptional tools, and you guys know that I do basket illusion work, and I use these beading tools in the basket illusion work all the time on platters and vessels. So it's a wonderful tool. I really like using it. They stay sharp for an incredibly long time because of the cobalt that's in the steel. Oops, sorry about that. I'm getting used to this iPad controller that I have. So when you use the tool, it has to be used where the points of the tool are right on center. I can zoom that up a little bit for you. So the points of the tool have to be right on dead center. Okay, so I'm a little high, so I'm going to drop my tool rest a little bit. And now I can see that my point of the tool is right on the center height. And you use the tool where the handle would be, which is down here, very low. There's no handle on the tool, it's not needed. Okay, but you want the handle part to be down low. So you want the tool so that it's down at, say, about a 45-degree angle from the wood. And when you use the tool, you would use it in a slight rocking motion like this. So it cuts with one point, then the other point, one point, then the other point, and back and forth. Alternative way to use the tool is just rocking it on the tool rest like this, side to side, where again, it cuts with one point and then the other point, one point and then the other point, and back and forth. But you never want to combine those two methods. You never want to do this and this at the same time. So you don't want to rock it and swing it at the same time. That makes your beads very narrow and your valleys very wide. So you don't want to do that. So once I've got the tool rest height set where I want it, I'm going to bring the tool rest right up here close to the work. And I'm going to put a bead not right here at the very end. I'm going to come in, say 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. We'll call it 3/16. And that's where I'm going to put my bead, right about there. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I'll put the overhead on there for you. So this is what it looks like here. And just back and forth, swinging it back and forth until that bead gets round. As soon as the top of the bead gets round, I stop cutting, okay? Because if I continue cutting, I would be scraping the top of the bead, and that brings tear out, chips, and all kinds of undesirable elements to it. So now that I've got the bead cut in there, now I want to expose it. I want to make it higher than the rest of the surface. So that means this little bit of extra wood that I left here, I got to get rid of it. And then the same thing in here, I got to get rid of some wood, and that makes the bead pop out of the wood. Okay, so I'm just lightly going to get rid of the wood over here on the outside without hitting the bead. That's the crucial thing, is that I don't hit the bead. And that's about all it takes right there. Okay, so right here, the bead is exposed. I got a little bit of frash in there, so I'm going to come in a little closer with it. And maybe I'll come in there with my detail gouge, because I can get much tighter with that. There we go. Okay, so that's nice and clean, and actually the bead came out very well. So now I got to expose it on the other side. So that means I've got to come in and cut in this direction towards me. Again, being really careful that I don't hit the bead with the bowl gouge. There we go. And then again with the detail gouge, I'll just come in there to make it clean. Okay, so now you can see that the bead is exposed on both sides. And I don't know if you could see it on the top view. You can see the bead over here or over here, wherever I am. There you go. Okay, so the next thing would be to finish up this surface in here and then figure out where the bead's going to go. That's going to delineate the rim from the bowl part. So I know where I've turned up to. So right over here is where it lines up with the spot on the back. So that's about where the beads are going to go. So now I'm going to get rid of some of this wood over here. Just thinning this out. Okay, we're just about there. Okay, and the thickness feels okay. So now I'm going to plant the bead where I want it to be. If I can find my beading tool, here it is. So once again, I got to make sure that tool rest height is correct. So my points are right on the center. To bring the beading tool into position, bring the tool rest into position, and I'm going to be looking down over the piece here so that I could see exactly where I want to put the bead. And this is where it's going to go, right here. Okay, so I've got the bead over there now. And then the rest of this is just got to get turned away. I'm also going to leave, just like I left a little step over here, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the bead. I'm going to leave a little step over there, or a fillet. Okay, so just got to get rid of some wood here now. Okay, now I'm going to cut that fillet, again, being really careful that I don't bump the bead with my bowl gouge. And that's going to expose the bead and make it proud of the surface. And then with my detail gouge, I'll come right up to the bead. Okay, so then I got to decide how much of a fillet do I want there, and I want it to be the same amount that I put on this side. I'm going to put the same amount of it on that side. So that means that I've got to cut away in another hair. Okay, right about there. So if you could see that detail forming there. Okay, so now I just got to get rid of wood. That's all I got to do. Just going to test my wall thickness here. I have a pair of calipers here I could use. Okay, so I'm a bit thicker there than I am here. Not by much, but we could fix that. Hard to believe I have a keyboard under all these shavings here. Okay, I'm making this a little bit thinner. And then get rid of the rest. Okay, so there you had some words of wisdom at the same time. I never remember which overlay I was putting those things on. I'm still getting used to this iPad controller here. There we go. Now I lost me. Okay, so I pretty much got the platter turned. Of course, I have to sand it up and everything yet. I would normally have sanded the back before I did the front. And then I would sand up the front. And then when I reverse it to take off the tenon, I would have already sanded all this. But since I haven't sanded anything, I'm going to leave my tenon on so that I can sand it later on. But what I will do is I'll show you how I would remove the tenon, but except I won't actually do it for you. So basically the platter is complete. Now, what I did choose to do on this particular one is that I left the rim of the platter flat and square here. Sometimes I would round this over. Sometimes I would chamfer just the two sharp corners here, just depending what the mood is. But this particular time, I just left it kind of square because I think that accentuates the bead detail a little bit better. In this area in here, if I wanted to do something in here, I could, you know, with some kind of texturing or something. I could do that later with, you know, some kind of a burr in a Fordham or in an NSK micromotor or something. I could put some kind of texture in here, or even with the Sorby texturing tool, I could do something like that. So there's all kinds of things you could do to decorate a platter. Now, this particular piece of wood, as I said, is just straight grain. It's very plain. This is not typically the kind of wood that I would want to use for a platter because it's not really featuring something spectacular that's in the wood. It's just blah. So for a piece of this particular piece, doing some kind of texture or some kind of enhancement in the rim area here would be appropriate. Okay, so there we have the platter. This is just off the tool. There's no sanding been done to it. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I turn away the tenon, but I won't actually do it because I do want to be able to sand it later. And I don't think you need to watch me sanding. And because if I turn on my dust collector, it would make so much noise that you wouldn't be able to hear me. So I will only show you how I do this. So again, if you remember before, I was smart enough to mark the center. So once again, I'm going to take the piece of mouse pad and I'm going to put it just against the piece of the platter, bring it right up against my chuck jaws, bring the mouse pad, the tailstock right up to it, just tighten it up. Just want it tight enough so that the piece can't turn. If I hold on to the chuck, I should not be able to turn the piece. Okay, and now it runs true. So what I would do is I would go in here with my bowl gouge and I would turn away the tenon over here, create my flat spot on the back if the flat spot's what I wanted. If you want the platter to be displayed in a platter stand and you don't want a flat back, then I could continue rounding over this convex surface all the way to the middle. But typically platters can get used. So you do want a large enough flat spot on the bottom so that they can be placed flat on the table without tipping or rocking as you're taking things in and out of the platter. So on an 11-inch platter like this, I would go with about a 4-inch bottom to make it stable on a table. And that's about the amount of wood that I left from here to there. So again, I would just take all this off with the bowl gouge. The last little piece that I can't get because it's underneath the live center, and then I would just come along with a little flush cutting saw and I would cut that off, and then I would sand the whole bottom of it completely flat. If you have a vacuum set up, you can put the platter onto vacuum. This way you can get the tailstock completely out of your way so that you can remove all of the wood as well as sand and everything without any tailstock in the way. I do have vacuum set up. I find it takes me longer to get everything hooked up and set up than it does just to do this. I don't think I've used my vacuum in over 10 years. And again, it's just more noise. So there you have it. Any questions? Don't all speak at once. Everybody awake? Can everybody hear me? You need words of wisdom?
Yes, we can hear you, Harvey. But no, there's a question there. Is a detail gauge based on a spindle or bowl gauge?
I'm sorry, is the detail gouge what?
Is it based on a spindle gauge or a bowl gauge?
It's a spindle gouge. It's actually a detail gouge. I could show you that. So this is a Doug Thompson 3/8 inch detail gouge. And it's probably one of my favorite tools next to the bowl gouge. You can see this one is getting to the end of its life. I've had to sharpen a little flat on it over here so that I can still hold on to it in the vary grind. But the flute is only about 2 inches of flute left on this one. But I've had this one for a long time. I do have another one, so I'm not worried about when this one runs out. But what I like about this is because it's a detail gouge, the flute is very shallow, which means the steel is thicker. You can get a little further off the tool rest without vibrations. And I could sharpen it almost to a point. So you can see that the profile of that tool, it's, you know, of course it's round on the very, very tip, but it is sort of pointy. So I could get into very, very tight spaces with that tool.
Another question for you, Harvey. What's your usual finish thickness for a platter?
Typically, I bring it down to about 1/4 of an inch. Again, depends on the diameter of the piece. This piece being 11 inches, 1/4 inch is about appropriate for it. I didn't really measure on this one. I'd say I'm more like 5/16 on this particular one. Sorry, I'm confusing myself with my, where am I here? There I am, I'm sorry. I got to stop with the jokes. So most of you know that whenever I demonstrate, I always tell stupid jokes. These little one-liners while I'm demonstrating. Yeah. And because with these remote demos, I can't gauge the participants' feedback, so I don't know if you're finding my jokes funny or not. So I decided I would put a couple jokes on the ticker on the bottom to just bring them up every now and then. But of course, I forgot to do that while I was demonstrating. So now I'm trying to do it while we're doing question and answer. But if I'm hitting the wrong buttons on the iPad, so we'll forget about that for now.
Okay. Another question for you. Is there a sloping angle on the surface between the beads on the rim?
If you're talking about this surface here and here, they are flat, and the bead is just projecting out of that, if that's what you mean. This surface is not sloped, and this surface is not sloped. So basically, it's coming into the bead at, you know, at sort of perpendicular, so to speak.
Okay. Okay, and what is your preference for a food-safe finish?
So I've always believed that any finish is food safe after it's completely cured. My preferred finish for everything that I do, except basket illusion doesn't get finished other than it gets an acrylic spray to fix the colors. But all my round and brown work that I do gets Minwax antique oil. I could show you a can real quick. This is Minwax antique oil, and this is a pint-sized can. They come in quart also, but I only buy the pints. And I've been using this for years and years and years. And the reason I use it is because I find it to be idiot-proof. So basically, I don't follow the directions. I just wipe it on with a clean white rag, like an old t-shirt type of fabric. I just wipe it on and I wipe it right off. They tell you to put it on liberally, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wipe it off, wipe off the excess. I don't do that. I just wipe it on and I wipe it off. And then I let it sit for at least 24 hours before I do a second coat. Wipe it on and wipe it right off. And then another 24 hours, a third coat. Wipe it on, wipe it off. And then however many coats you want until you get the shine that you want. Generally, 3 coats, you've got a pretty decent shine. 4 coats, you're getting really glossy, and 5 coats, you can see your face in it. So I find it to be literally idiot-proof as long as you keep it out of the dust. While it's drying, it won't get any dust settling into the finish. All my friends here in Atlanta know very well that I use this finish all the time, and it's the code name for it in the Atlanta wood turning clubs is Harvey oil.
Thanks. Another question for you, technical one this time. What are you using on your iPad to control your display?
It's an app that I downloaded. It's called vMix Control Surface. And you get it in the App Store. It's only for iPad, and it's $5 in the US. It controls just about everything. And the only thing that I wish it had a little bit more of was shortcuts. It only gives you room for 4 shortcuts. But because you can control all of the inputs and the overlays and the previews and all the transitions and things like that, you can control all that with dedicated buttons on the app, so you really don't need many shortcuts anymore. So I really only have 2 shortcuts that I'm using, one for fade in and one zoom in and zoom out. I would like to use it for a few more things so that I didn't have to have the keyboard next to me, but for $5, it's the best app I've ever seen.
Okay, thanks. Another question on the finishing. Do you sand between the coats of the oil and wax you apply?
With the Minwax Antique Oil, I do not sand or do anything between coats. I literally wipe it on and wipe it off. And then 24 hours later, I wipe it on and I wipe it off again. If I do find that any dust settled into it, then I'll take some 4-0 steel wool and I will rub it down just to get it cleaned up. But typically I keep it so that in an area where it won't get dust into it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Harvey. Any other questions? No, I don't think we have. Thank you very much for doing the demo, Harvey. It's been very interesting, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I'll unmute everybody now so they can chat. So just give me a sec, and there we go. Okay, everybody should be able to unmute themselves now if they want to join in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much, Harvey. I'll put this online as soon as I can get it edited and
Thanks, Paul.
uploaded.
Harvey, are you planning to do demos for clubs?
I am,
Not
yes.
remote demos, but physically, if we were to invite you to Anchorage as an example, once the COVID-19's over.
I have been demonstrating a lot in the last 7 years. And I've gone as far as Australia, and I have been to England to do the AWGB in 2018, I think it was. And I've demonstrated all around the US. So yes, I do, but I am doing less of it. And now that we have the remote demonstration capability, I'm hoping to do more remote demonstration and less traveling. So again, it depends. If there's an opportunity to go someplace, and it's worth the trip, I would consider it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm getting old. So that's why the traveling part becomes difficult.
I know
That's why
the
I won't
feeling.
say I'm getting. I am old.
Well,
What's the biggest platter, mate?
you got over puberty, I guess.
Way past that.
What's the biggest platter you've done?
Was that a question? I didn't get it.
What's the biggest platter you've done?
The biggest platter I've done is about 20 inches, because that's what this you could do on a Powermatic. Now, one time I did turn one off the bed. It was a basket illusion piece too, and I think it was about 22 inches. But that's I only did that one time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Harvey, what is the highest grade of sanding that you use on your platters?
Generally, for this kind of wood, 400. But for like hard, dense woods, I would go higher than that. And then everything after 320, I do with random orbit. Everything before 320, I do with just a regular drill. I would use this thing up to 240. And then I get the random orbit out for 320 and up. So usually 400 is adequate. But on some woods, very, very hard, dense woods, sometimes you could still see some scratches if you really examine it closely. So I may go to 600, maybe even 8, but generally 400 is where I stop.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Harvey, this is Gordon from San Antonio.
Hey, Gordon.
Perfect timing. This is a great demo.
Thank you.
Timing for me. I have a bunch of platters to make, and so I think you can expect a call from our wood turning club, Alamo Wood Turning.
Okay.
We'll look forward to linking up with you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks.
We're doing a lot of Zoom and vMix type videos anyway, so we can communicate well with you.
I think that's kind of the trend now around the world. I think for clubs to stay engaged, I think you got to do these remote demos. Otherwise, I think clubs will fall apart if they don't keep their members active somehow.
Exactly.
Harvey, you mentioned the grits you were using, but what speed do you prefer to sand at?
Well, whenever I sand, I slow it down quite a bit. I generally sand it under 500. If you sand too fast, you basically just the wood and the sandpaper and never getting a chance to kiss each other, so to speak.
Exactly. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Harvey, there's a question here about what's the UK equivalent to min-waxed anti-coil. I'm guessing you don't know the UK brand.
I don't know that.
What's in the min-wax? Is it just a tung oil based oil, is it?
So that's a good question because it's a proprietary formula and they don't even tell you on the can what's in it.
Right.
You got to assume there's tung oil or varnish or something like that in there because it is an oil finish. But
something along the lines of a Danish oil type oil, but possibly with a few other additives perhaps, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I guess the Danish oil or finishing oils that we will get in the UK are going to be the closest we're going to get to it.
But I would think that you could get Minwax products in the UK.
Yeah, I can't remember seeing it. Has anyone else seen it?
No.
I mean, they've been around for a long, long time.
No, you're right.
Let me see if it says anything on the can here.
There's a £20 delivery on it if you buy it on eBay from America.
Yeah.
I know Amazon sells it in the US because that's usually where I've been buying it now.
Yeah. Not worth checking out Amazon then.
It just got all the typical warnings on the can.
Yeah.
It just says it produces a soft luster that is durable, easily maintained, highly resistant to staining, recommended for interior wood surfaces and blah, blah, blah. And then more of the warnings. Doesn't tell you anything what's in it. Just don't drink it and don't put it in your eyes and all that stuff.
We have a link to a UK source on Amazon by the looks of it. So, yep, there it is.
Yep, £13, 10 pence on Amazon.
Very good.
There you go. So what's that? Was that 13 pounds?
That's
So what is
25
that?
quid shipping.
Yeah, £13. Yeah.
So what is that in the US? I don't know, $15?
Just under $20 probably.
Less than that, probably 16, something like that.
Okay.
And that's about what we pay in the US for it.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend only buy the pint, don't buy the quart. Unless
Yeah, with a lot of
you
oil.
use it up really, really quickly. Because if you buy a quart and you don't use it up within a year or so, it'll start getting thick and gel and gum up on you. And also, if you ever leave the cap off and forget to put the cap and you come down a day or two later and you realize that you left the cap off, then you throw it away because it won't dry.
Yeah, lots of these oils tend to thicken or start to coagulate, don't they? If you buy too much and don't use it fast enough.
Yeah. So I see Joe Nolan asked if you can buy D-Way tools in the UK. So the only place you could buy D-Way tools is from D-Way, and they do ship around the world. So you can buy them from them. You can go to their website. It's d-waytools.com. And you can ship to the UK, but I imagine it could get a little expensive on the shipping. If you're just looking for beading tools, Ashley Isles over in the UK makes beading tools. They're not the same, but they're similar. And they do make them. I know he makes a 3mm, which would be like our 1/8. And I think he makes a 5mm, which is like the 3/16. And those are the two that I use 99% of the time. I have used them, and they do work okay. Matter of fact, I do have one someplace in my drawers here. So yes, you can get D-Way tools, but you could also get Ashley Isles over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Ashley Isles are high-speed steel rather than M42, but
That's true, yeah.
Other than that, probably not a lot of difference, is there?
See if I know where my Ashley Isles tool is. Not in there.
For anybody thinking about buying the mini wax, it's £13 and 10 pence for the oil, but another £12.25 for the shipping.
So this is the Ashley Isles tool. So you see, it's very similar. And he sells them handled. So you don't really want to handle. Now, I remember at the AWGB seminar, he was also selling them unhandled. So I would prefer them unhandled. But since his tools are just this square shank, it wouldn't be as easy to hold on to. So you might want to put a very short handle on it, or just a little ball on the end, like a golf ball, just to make it easy to hold on to. You could even say it says Ashley Isles right there. And this one is the, I'd say this is the 5mm because it looks like about 3/16. And what's amazing is that I found it. Because I'm one of those people that has too many tools. I'm sorry to say.
Never admit it.
Nobody has too many tools.
Hey, look, we all have the same fear that when we leave this world, that our wives will sell our stuff away for what we told them we paid for it.
Harvey and everybody, I have a suggestion for use of Minwax that really has helped me a lot. I used to use it out of the can, Minwax tongue oil, and just put it on a rag right from the can. And I found that the cans never lasted very long. So what I've done now is in the last couple of cans, I've just poured a little bit into a yogurt container and sealed the can up immediately, or the Minwax container up immediately. And I now find that I can get all the way to the bottom of a can using Minwax without it going bad and hardening up. So just dispense a little tiny bit, what you need, and in a can. And by the way, always throw your rags in a tin can or soak them in water.
Good point. So that's a good point about dispensing just a little bit at a time. The more you open the can, the more you let the drying agents get out. And by doing that, you're shortening the life of the product. So that's a good point, is just dispense a little bit, maybe an ounce or two, and then keep the can closed. And then when you use that up, you dispense a little bit more. They also sell a product called Bloxygen, where you can spray a little bit of that into the can before you shut it. And what that does is it eats up the oxygen that's in the can that prevents it from gumming up. And another trick is to just store the can upside down. So that way all of the oxygen is on the opposite side. So the rest of it doesn't get exposed to the oxygen. And that also extends the life of it as well. I used to use it quick enough so that I never really had to worry about a can going bad. But now that I just do basket illusion work, I really don't use the Minwax hardly at all anymore, unless I'm turning something that's, not basket illusion, which I don't do that much of these days. I have so much basket illusion sitting around the house, I better just start doing something else.
We also have some bags that prolong it as well, keep the oxygen out. Special plastic bags that you fill and roll and seal.
Yeah, those are like medical type of bags. I saw that in the AAW magazine. Somebody was advertising them. You actually store the stuff in these sort of plastic bags, and then you squeeze all the air out of them, and then you close the bag up. So it's sort of like a medical, like an IV type of a bag or something like that.
Right.
And those things work on any kind of oil finishes, not because Minwax antique oil, is just one of them, but all oil finishes are going to gum up and solidify on you over time. They're going to turn into Jello after, long enough time.
Another tip I learned was you can put marbles in the can as well to bring the level of the liquid up to the top of the can. So you basically remove the oxygen that way.
Yeah, right.
It gets a bit messy, I suppose, when you get towards the end of the can, but it's doable, I guess.
And then they have some of these, products you could buy, like this Bloxygen, that you would spray into the can, which I think costs more than the can of oil does in the first place. Although it's good for many cans, you just use a little bit of it. But you figure every time you open the can, to finish a piece, and then you're going to spray some of this stuff in the can and then close it. Every time you do that, so you might wind up using a whole can of Bloxygen, on 1 pint of Minwax antique oil.
Yeah.
And I think that really costs more than the price of the oil does. I'm not sure. I never did it, but I do know people that do use it. And they say it works, so.
Yeah, I think they're nitrogen, aren't they? It's just nitrogen spray. So you spray that in, so you push the oxygen out, basically. They do the same with packaging food these days, don't they? Put nitrogen into the bag so it preserves the food longer.
So we had a couple questions about sharpening the beating tool and what angle. So the answer to the question, I can show you both. Set you up on my tool camera here. So the angle that it's sharpened to is the angle that it comes from D-Way. And I believe it's about 55 degrees, but I'm not 100% sure. So whatever that angle is, I just maintain the angle. I don't change it. Although I will tell you that angle is really not important. If you ground more of the heel away and change it to 45 degrees, or grind more of the points away and leave the heel alone and make it 60 degrees, it's still going to behave exactly the same. I have beating tools that my students, for when I would teach, have really messed up on me. But they still work quite well. So I found that the angle really doesn't make much difference. To sharpen the tool, I would just put a honing stone down, and then I would put the tool on the honing stone so that the bevel of the tool is on the stone, and then I would just pull it to me 4 or 5 times until the points of the tool on the bevel surface gets nice and sharp. So really what you're doing is you're honing this bevel over here. And I would hone this tool. First of all, it stays sharp for a long time. Let me tell you that. I use the 1/8 inch tool. This is the 3/16 tool. This only cuts on my basket illusion. This only cuts the outer bead on the rim. Then the 1/8 tool cuts all the other beads. And I can do 2 large platters on both sides with that 1/8 inch beating tool before I need to hone it. So they stay sharp for a long time. Then I hone it, and now I'm good for another 2 platters. Again, this is assuming I'm using maple, which is what I normally use. After about 10 or 12 hones, then the hollow grind on the bevel surface starts to get flatter and flatter. So then the honing takes a little bit longer. So then I would go to the grinder and I would regrind the hollow grind. But what I do is I put it on the grinding wheel, so that first I turn the grinder up full speed. I could show you better on here, I think. So if you imagine that my chuck is my grinding wheel, I would turn the grinder on until it gets to full speed, and then I would turn the grinder off. Okay, then while the grinder's spinning down, I would put the heel of the tool up against the wheel and then raise the handle until the entire tool is sitting flat on the wheel, and then I would just let the wheel spin down. So by doing that, I reestablish the hollow grind, but I'm only losing a micron of steel doing that. And by doing it that way, first honing 10, 12 times, and then grinding it with the grinder just spinning down without being under power, the tool is going to last you your lifetime and then the lifetime of another generation after you.
Is that
So,
an 8-inch radius?
yeah, I use 8-inch CBM wheels on mine, but it doesn't matter. 6 inches is fine. You're just going to have a steeper hollow grind. They will literally last a long, long time. I mean, I could show you the difference between two tools. See if I can get them out here. That's 1/8. Okay, so I'm going to line these up on my tool table here. So these are both 1/8 inch tools, and I'm lining the ends of them up. Whoops, it's rolling away on me. Okay, so the one tool, the short tool, is one that I have used for probably 5 years. And this is my tool that I use at home. This is not one that I let students use. And while that may look like a huge difference on what you're seeing, because I've got the camera zoomed in on there, it's only, I'd say, about less than 1/2 of an inch difference in height. So for 5 years of using this tool, for all the basket illusion work I do, I've only lost 1/2 inch of steel in 5 years. And this is the tool that does 99.9% of my bead work. So there's, you could see another view of it like that. Okay, so this one is the new one, and then the shorter one is the older one. And again, like that looks like it's a big difference, but it's not. It's really not even 1/2 of an inch. I think they sell for about $50 on D-Way in the US. Maybe a little bit more now. And I know if you buy 2 or more, I think it's $1 or $2 less or something like that. And they make them in 6 sizes: 1/16, 3/32, 1/8, 3/16, 1/4, and 3/8. And yes, I do CBN wheel. That was a question there. Show us how the tool rests on rest. What do you mean, Dennis?
During cutting.
Huh?
Which edge is down? Which edge is down
when you're using the tool?
Yeah.
To use it when you're cutting, you would use it flute down. So when you're using it on the tool rest, it's flute down, okay, not flute up. Flute down, and the handle, where the handle would be low at about a 45-degree angle, and then the points of the tool have got to be right on the center, right on the equator, and then you would be wiggling the tool side to side when you're using it like that. So it's always flute down. And when I teach, a lot of times I find students going flute up. And then I walk over and I always turn them and I say, it's flute down. And then I walk away and I come back and it's flute up. And then I come back and I show them flute down. And then if they catch them on a third time, I take a Sharpie marker and I write right on the back of their left hand, flute down, with the Sharpie marker.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Dennis.
Harvey, what type of pens or colorants do you use on your basket elution?
So I only use India ink markers made by Faber-Castell, and they're called PITT, P-I-T-T, artist pens. And they're India ink, so there's a lot of advantage of India ink over any of the alcohol dye markers like Sharpies, Prismacolor, Copic markers. Those are all alcohol based. And so India ink, first of all, it's permanent and it's light fast, which means that it does not fade in sunlight. No alcohol dye markers can make that claim. So the other benefit is alcohol markers penetrate the wood very deeply. So as soon as you touch the pen to the wood, it gets sucked into the wood as if there was a vacuum pulling it in. But the India ink doesn't do that. It doesn't go very deeply. So if I make a mistake with the India ink markers, I can shave it away with a scalpel. But with the alcohol markers, you would have to carve it away. And it wouldn't look good. And also, it doesn't bleed. Whereas the alcohol, if you hold it in one place too long, it'll bleed on you. And Dennis is holding something up there.
This is you remember this piece I got from you in, I believe, a TAW symposium, a little
Probably.
blue and black piece. Really like it.
Hold it up so they could see the inside better. And speak so you speak so you're the speaker.
There you go.
You remember this piece, Harvey?
Yes,
I got it from auction. I think it was TAW. Really nice piece.
Yep. The other advantage of India ink over Sharpies is that, or any alcohol, any alcohol-based markers, you have to test it before you put any kind of protective finish on it. I did a platter one time. It's laying around my shop here someplace. I wish I could find it and show it to you so you could see how I cried over it. But I did a platter with alcohol markers, and then I went and sprayed a protective finish on it, and the colors just bled altogether and made a complete mess of the piece. So anytime you're using alcohol markers, you have to test it first on some scrap wood to make sure that whatever you spray is not going to cause it to run. Whereas the India ink, it doesn't care. I could spray anything I want on it, and it's no problem at all. Now, I only use a Krylon acrylic matte finish because I don't want the pieces to shine at all. But I put 5 coats of acrylic matte on it. I never have to worry about it running or anything like that.
Wow.
So the question was, how do I do the rope effect? So that's, he's talking about on the rim of the piece that Dennis showed, that it's all burned on there with a pyrography pen. You got to speak, Dennis, to make yourself pop up.
I didn't say, oh, well, here's the piece again. Here's a rim detail. Did it pop up?
Yeah. So that's just something that's all burned on there. That takes a good bit of time to do that, but it gives the effect of that the rim looks woven just like the rest of the piece.
Harvey, what was that? The stuff you spray on? You said the matte finish that does it onto the India ink.
It's Krylon acrylic matte, number 1311. I could show you a can. This is what it looks like right here. Oops, I got the wrong camera here. This is what it looks like. Krylon matte finish. And it's number 1311. It leaves absolutely no shine at all. And you can get it at Walmart is the cheapest. It's about $4 and change a can at Walmart. And if you buy it at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you'll pay about $8 a can. And one of the benefits of using that acrylic matte, even on regular work, for example, after I finish up sand this platter, if I wanted to, I could give it about 5 coats of spray with that acrylic matte. and it would have, it would, you know, it would look like it was sprayed, but it would have no shine at all. But then I could buff it with the 3 buffing wheels, and it would pick up quite a shine after doing that. Now, of course, without having oil finish, it's not, you know, a very protective kind of finish, but you could seriously shine a piece up if you just sprayed it with that matte finish. And that's something John Jordan taught me.
Harvey, do you ever use airbrush?
No, I don't. I bought one a long time ago, and I don't think I even opened the box. But then I have a lot of things like that that I've bought and never used either. You know, you go to a symposium and, you know, you go to the vendor area and you say, I got to get that, I got to get that. And then by the time you get home, the, you know, other things take your attention away.
Impulse shopping. Impulse shopping.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And we think women are bad, but I mean, I don't mean anything negative for all you women out there watching this. But I think I'm worse than my wife with impulse shopping. When it comes to tools, that is, not clothes. Clothes, I could wear the same underwear for 14 years and it doesn't matter to me.